Hello friends, welcome back to GM Philosophy in the Morning. I'm the GM Philosopher. Today we are talking about how to help your D&D players be better players. And I've got actually 10 tips for you, 10 pieces of advice, kind of 10 talking points here in our GM Philosophy Discord, which if you'd like to join us, links in the description, is free. And we're over 500 Game Masters strong now. But in the GM Philosophy Discord, there are a lot of conversations about like basically players who maybe don't seem to be having fun, seem disengaged, or like scrolling on their phones, right? Maybe they don't show up on time, like these types of things. Whatever it is, like I'm not labeling those things specifically as the only issues, but like you as a game master, you might be thinking to yourself, how do I get my players to really get into the game like in a way that would make me have more fun in the game? And we're going to talk about that in this video. So we're going to start with point number one. Okay, define better player first. Okay, like what do we actually want to accomplish? What do we actually care about? Okay, now I think that it's really important to understand that every game master might have slightly different thoughts about this, and a lot of this probably comes down to the seriousness of that particular game master. So like for me, for example, I am much less like upset by a player showing up late or something like that. Literally doesn't really bother me at all. What really bothers me, what I would like to avoid in my games, is like players not paying attention to the game, getting on their phone in the middle of the game, making disruptive noises, or like one of my biggest, absolute most pet peeves is when a player like is literally playing a video game on their phone, like while we're playing D&D. And then you can hear the noise, and that's like distracting people from the game. Like for me, that's an absolute no-go. Like it's like, why would I want to run this game for you? Go play your video game somewhere else. Like this is what I think to myself, right? Now, I haven't had that situation happen in a long time. I have had it in the past, but it's important for you to define what you're looking for. And I think it's easiest to kind of just identify the things you don't want to happen, right? So like make a list of the things that you maybe have experienced that you don't like, that you're tired of happening. It could be with your own group that you have right now, or it could be with a previous group. Make a list of that, because those are the things you want to hone in on, okay? And that's going to take us to point number two. Set the tone early. Session zero is everything. So for your group, you might have already had session zero. You might already be partway into the campaign. If you are, that's okay. Have a new session zero. Have like a second session zero. To be honest, these are really good to do as check-ins. But when you do this, it's really important to talk about the things that bother you. It's really important to do that. And that might be difficult to do. I wouldn't suggest doing it like at the beginning of your next game session. I would recommend scheduling a legitimate session zero to do that, because it might be a little bit of a hard conversation for some people. You should engage in this conversation with this kind of attitude. You should be like, hey, first of all, I love this game. I love all you guys. You're all awesome. However, I want to talk about a few things. I want to elevate this game. I want to take this game to a new level, which, by the way, I actually have written a book called The Advanced Art of TTRPG Game Mastery, and that's what this entire book is about: elevating the game to a transcendent experience that makes it more than just a game. It makes it an emotionally resonant storytelling experience. You can purchase that. Links in the description. I would encourage you to pick that up. If you're wanting to take your games to a deeper level, I would encourage you to grab that, because it contains all my thoughts, philosophies, tactics, insights on how to do that, and how I've learned to do it in over 20 years of running games. So make sure to grab that. With that being said, we want to engage in this dialogue very gently, and we want to be specific, because if we're not specific, then people aren't given a proper choice to understand what we're trying to say, right? Because as a leader, it's your job to be specific about the issues to try to make them better in the game. So you might say something like, now that we've been gaming for a while, I want to talk about a few things that are taking away from the game experience for me. And then you make your list. So like, for example, people being on their phones. And to me, to be super honest, I think it's important to be specific to the player, because I think it's actually kind of disrespectful and weird when you say a thing. It's like everyone knows who you're talking about, but you don't mention them. Like that's a little strange and passive aggressive. So I would be like, one thing that's bothering me is like people being on their phones while we're gaming. So like Bob, for example, I noticed last session when we were in that combat, you were on your phone. Now, I'm not like mad about it or anything. I'm not trying to like be mad at you about it. However, I would like to talk about it, because like I put a lot of work into game sessions, and I would like love to have like an engaging back and forth. And when people are on their phones, I will say it's very demoralizing, and it like takes away energy from me. How do you guys feel about that? Is it possible that we could maybe make ourselves a rule where we put our phones away for the game? Like, what do you think? What do you think? So this is how I would encourage you to go through each item in your list, okay? And we have to be very, very realistic about this. We don't want to get angry. We don't want to like get fed up to the point where we're exploding on people, right? In a general life sense, it's always better to be specific and to talk about it sooner rather than later, letting it build up, right? So that's what we're trying to do here. Now, let's move on to the next point here, which is to teach your players the power of backstory and story for the characters. Now, this is a little bit more complicated, and this one you have to treat as like a spectrum, because there are going to be some players who are just not going to be very interested in this. But personally, I've found that one of the best ways to bring depth to a campaign is to leverage player backstories and details from it to then manifest the story we're embarking on. Because the truth is, this story that we're about to tell together at the table is the story of the player characters, and all of the setup. Yeah, it does happen in the world to a small extent, but the truth is, the setup for your story happened in the players' backstories. And it's really important. So you might have a player or two who is like, I don't really care about backstory. For example, in my game, The Darkest Dawn, which, by the way, I'm running this on Start Playing Games. My first game got completely filled up, but I have opened a second game. If you'd like to game with me, you should check out my Start Playing Games profile. I also may be dropping some other really interesting games in there that I'm going to start here pretty soon. So make sure to check that in the description. You could come game with me and it'd be awesome. You could kind of see how I do it firsthand if you'd like. With that being said, here's the thing. I had only one player. So I have a full party right now, but I had one player who basically said to me at session 0, I'm not like a backstory guy. like I like to create my character and I like to give them their gear and stuff, but I'll be honest, it's hard for me to make backstories. I don't really like making backstories. I'm just letting you know, which I really appreciate, because then I said, oh, okay, awesome. I could help you. Like, we could work together to work out a backstory. And then basically I asked him a series of questions that kind of helped me to kind of lead up. So basically I was like, first of all, where in the world, did your character come from? Here are the top 3 most likely places in my world where your character might have come from. And then I told him a little bit about each one. He's like, oh, I'm really feeling that one. It's like, oh, awesome. Okay, so we know they're from this place. So with that being said, here's their class. Let's talk about how they got started in that class. So then we just walk through it, like walking through their backstory. And sometimes you only need a little bit to get started, but you do need enough to give context. And I'm going to tell you what, the character arc developing for that player is so deep, partly because that backstory is simple, but it gives me everything I need. It gave me everything I needed. And his character concept was so cool and so good that now it is such a strong character arc in the story. It's so much fun. Every time that character has the spotlight, it's just so much fun for me, because I am enjoying that story so much, right? The story that character is going on. So just letting players dive in with no backstory, unless you enjoy that, right, doesn't have to be the only way you do it, but they may not be able to do it to a certain level. You may have to step in and help them do it. I personally feel like this is really good, but I will also challenge you and say, without a backstory, you are not setting your story up to be maximally emotionally resonant. It always helps to have some backstory, because that's the background launching pad of the player-driven story you're about to embark on. So another thing you can do is basically show your players what good play looks like in the way that you conduct the game. So for example, and then this kind of goes without saying, but I think it's important to bring up, we want to model good behavior, the kind of behavior we want to have at the table, to such a degree that we expect ourselves to be 20% better at it than our players, because it's a lead by example, lead from the front sort of situation. The truth is, no one is probably going to care as much about your game as you, and that's okay. You're the game master, you're the leader, you're the one, sort of making sure that the ship is going somewhere by incorporating the teamwork of everyone together to create the story. Okay, you're not the one telling the story, but you are probably the community leader of the group. As it's been pointed out recently, we've been talking about this in the Discord, if the barbarian doesn't show up, okay, well, you're one player down. If the game master doesn't show up, there is no game, right? So we are a really important part of this process, but we also want to take into consideration that no one's going to care as much as we do. So if we perform at a very high level and we expect everyone else to, kind of be within 20% of where we are, this is setting a very good example, right? So for example, I would never want to pause the game and check my Facebook messages in the middle of the game, be like, hold on guys, I'm just gonna text this person back real quick. I'm doing exactly what I would want my players to do, even if I'm okay with my players texting back or something. Like personally, if someone gets a text and they're texting back, it doesn't really bother me, because you can tell there's a difference between someone just responding to a message quick, and then you can also tell if they're browsing their phone, not paying attention to the game, not being engaged in that game. game experience. So, for me, those are two very different things, but I don't ever want to be like, hold on guys, I just gonna check my notifications real quick. Like that would be me setting a very bad example, and I don't want to do that, right? So another thing would be like long combat turns. Like, so for example, if you are like, oh my gosh, my players never like figure out what they want to do beforehand, but then when your NPCs come up or the villains come up, you're sitting there for like 5 minutes trying to decide what they're going to do. This is not leading by example. So if we can make our performance tight and basically deliver everything that we want to be given by our players and then some, this sets the game up to be maximally successful, and it makes your requests of them to like tighten it up more legitimate. Okay. And this is going to lead us to point number 6, react big to player ideas. Okay. So one thing that is really important is we want the player experience to be very good. We want to encourage the players to have great ideas. One of the quickest ways to beat down engagement, to make our players less likely to want to be engaged, is by not letting them feel like a significant part of the world, not showing them that their creativity really matters to you at the table. If they feel like you are excited about what they're doing, this is going to get them more excited. But if you're just drab and dull and you don't really care, or even worse, you kind of discourage them, you're kind of asking for them to be disengaged, right? So we will always want to lead from the front in this way too. We want to be excited about their characters. And to be honest, even if you are having a hard time getting excited about their character, it's in your best interest to find a way to get very excited very quick. It's kind of your responsibility. If you do this, and you show that excitement for every character, right? You react to their ideas. You show their significance in the world. This is going to set you up for them to be maximally invested, right? Now, keep in mind, talking to your players about problematic behavior was first in this list because that's probably something that has to happen if you're having a problem with players. You can try your best to be the best you can be, but if you never have specific conversations with them, it's probably not going to matter. But if we have those hard conversations with them, like we talked about in the beginning, and you do all these other things, it's going to set you up for them to respect what you're saying that much more, right? So you see there's like two sides to it, okay? This is going to lead us to point number 7. Call players in before you call them out, okay? Now, this is a more player case specific thing, okay? But like, let's just say, for example, that you have one player who is not being engaged. They're not paying attention to turns. You can tell they're not really there. Maybe they're zoned out or whatever it is. To be honest, whatever the problem is, let's just say that, you notice it and it bothers you. So you want to deal with it to make the table better. Well, one thing that's a really good tactic for this sometimes, and I would say that this is more like after you've had that session 0 recentering, if you continue to see things happening, then you can kind of message a player between games or meet up between games or something and say, hey, I just wanted to mention, we did talk about the thing, but I noticed last session you were a little disengaged. Now, I'm not upset about it. In fact, I kind of wanted to just touch base with you and find out, is everything going good in the game? Like, are you enjoying it? Or is there like a game reason? Maybe there's something I'm doing that's causing you to not be engaged. I would like to invite you to tell me about that. I would like to hear your perspective, because if there's something I could do to help, I would love to help, right? Now, we got to be a little careful. Here's the thing. Too much of this, and it gets to a point where it's like, why bother, right? It's like there kind of comes a point where if you don't see like noticeable improvements, it's probably not going to be any after you mention it once or twice. And it's probably true that this player is just not the right fit for your table. And this happens. Sometimes there are players who are just not a good fit for your table. Hence why I think vetting players is really important. I think it's also really important to stop gaming with gamers who do not fit well at your table. In all of my best campaigns, there was always one player, or maybe sometimes two, who I actually I had to stop gaming with them. I stopped inviting them to the game because it just turned out that they pulled it down more than they lifted it up. They took away from it for everyone with whatever the problem was, right? But, if you think there's hope, then having this kind of conversation where you kind of ask, what could I do to help you feel more engaged, to give them a chance to share if maybe there is something going on that you could help with. I will admit this usually isn't the problem, but sometimes it is. But if it is one of the problems, then this can give them a good chance to talk about it, and then for you two to connect on it and maybe fix it. Maybe they're like, well, I'll be honest, I'm not feeling this character. And you could be like, okay, all right. So like, let's rewind. When was the last time you were feeling the character? And then where did it go wrong for you? Like, let's talk about that, right? So you can kind of maybe talk about these things. Sometimes that's the issue. And then sometimes players are not very good at talking to you about that, right? If that makes sense. Sometimes you have to lead that conversation, which is to be expected because you're like the leadership figure of the game. So here's another tip is use highlight moments to cement growth. Okay. So one of the best ways to get people to do what you want them to do is to give them positive reinforcement when they do it. So never forget about the power of when a player is really engaged during the game, or they have done a really good job at the thing that you were a little like, you maybe had an issue with, but they have gotten really good about not doing that thing. Or maybe they're just doing way better at role playing, or whatever it is that you were kind of hoping to get more of from them. Maybe they do it in one session. It is such a good idea to call that out and to be like, man, you really, like, you were so zoned into your character tonight. That was so awesome. I love it. Like, that made me so excited about your character. And then that scene that happened, that was so good, right? So it's like giving them that positive reinforcement, letting them know that it matters to you is really important. Another thing I used to do is I used to give out like awards. Like when I was doing XP based leveling, I would give out XP awards every night for like deepest role play and then player's choice moments. So like I would award like 100 extra XP to whatever player I thought had the deepest role play from my perspective, the GM. But then I would also have all the players vote on who they thought, like basically who owned like the best scene or the funniest scene or the most compelling scene, like just like who was the player of the game that session. And then they would all vote and the winner would get an extra 100 XP as well. And that was a really fun incentive to kind of get players into the game and stuff. But that was one way that I found to try to bring more role play out because I wanted my players to role play more. So using that positive reinforcement is very, very good. Next tip on the list is kind of a general leadership tip in general, which is don't let things go that bother you without like talking about them or following up with them. One of the biggest leadership quandaries you can get yourself into is when a thing happens, you think, I don't like that, or we should talk about that, or that should change. It's like, that that is not contributing to the goal that everyone wants to reach. There's like a problem, right? You can tell. But then you don't do anything or you don't say anything. And the reason we don't usually do anything or say anything is partly because we may doubt ourselves. We might think, well, maybe I'm, reading into it too much, or maybe like I'm being too hard on people. And sometimes we're also afraid. It's like we're a little bit afraid of how that person's going to react, right? So for me, like I'm a bit of a recovering people pleaser. So sometimes I'll be tempted to not say something because I just don't want to like have a conflict with someone. Like it's that simple. And a conflict doesn't have to mean a fight. It could literally mean just stating differences of opinion in a calm way and then talking through it, right? Now, thankfully in my life, I've had a lot of practice at having like what I would call healthy, respectable conflict. So I'm a lot less, like I care a lot less about that now than I used to. But it's really important that when things actually happen in your game that are threatening to drag it down, that you don't let them continue. Now, would I say that you should jump right on every little thing that happens? No, that's not what I'm saying. For me personally, it's like this. If something happens once, it's like, well, that could have been a fluke. Anything can happen. Let's not make too big a deal out of it. Let's just leave it be, right? But if it happens like twice, then it's like, okay, there's probably some kind of like behavioral thing here, a habitual thing. Like this is happening on purpose, right? And then you can kind of decide whether or not you want to address it. But then if it happens a third time, it's time to address it. It's time to talk about it. I can't wait any longer. If I do, that's not fair to the player. It's going to perpetuate the cycle, and it's going to get me frustrated. I'm going to be thinking about it. It's going to be a negative thing sitting inside of me, and I'm going to bring that energy into the game, which is not fair to the players either. So for me to be right with everyone, right with myself, right with the universe, right with the game, I have to talk about the things that are bothering me, right? So this is really important. So don't leave things unresolved, right? And then my final tip here is just this. End with empowerment. Okay, I want to bring this around to a conclusion where you feel empowered as a game master. So here's the thing. There are, over 7 billion people on this planet. And there are some of them who are just not going to be a good fit for your game. No matter how much they try, no matter how much you try to coach them, no matter how much you try to compromise, there are some players and some game masters who are just incompatible. That is not a failure. for the player or the game master. The truth is, we all have different levels of like seriousness with which we want to engage in TTRPGs. And I think seriousness is the right word. So like maybe more serious about the rules, more serious about immersion, more serious about roleplay, more serious about story, right? So at the very serious end, we have people who want to follow the rules strictly and they want deep roleplay and they want you to be in character. And it's like very like, there's like a robust set of expectations that are very high level. And at the other hand, we literally have the players who are super casual, who are more like the beer and pretzels gamers. Like maybe they are on their phones between turns and you don't care and you're just like chill with it. Maybe they don't make it to every session. Maybe they literally don't even pay that close attention to the game, but you all still laugh. You order pizza, you have a good time. It's a fun time to hang out and you enjoy it. And you all make a few cocktails and it's a fun time. And the game is more of an excuse to get together and have community than it's about the game. That is super valid, totally fine. Personally, I do not like those kinds of games personally because I'm a way more serious gamer than that. But I know people who run games like that and they love to run those games and they have great relationships with their players and they all have such a fun time getting together and it's super valid. There's nothing wrong with that. But just remember that like if that is someone's vibe, then trying to get them to go to the serious end might not even be fair. It might not be fair to even have the expectation of them. And the only way to tell is if you just have the honest conversation. And to be honest, included in your session 0 about this, or maybe your re-session 0, might be a good discussion about this levels of seriousness thing. Like show them this video and then, be like, it's possible that we want two different things out of this game and that we are, kind of like having a hard time getting in the same rhythm because we're trying to do different things, right? This is a super fair thing to talk about. And while those conversations can be hard to have and they can feel like criticism or a fight, it doesn't have to be criticism, it doesn't have to be a fight. You just be honest humans being honest with each other. Kind of wish humans could do that more. But a lot of times humans tend to let things build up till they get emotional. And then there's like anger, frustration, or stress. And then it makes it more complicated. But anyway, all right. Thank you so much for coming back for another episode of Gym Philosophy in the Morning. Empowering game masters to run better games is the goal of the channel. I'll see you awesome people on the next one.